Hello everyone, in this video I want to talk about some of the symptoms I had experienced when I was experiencing pesticide poisoning. And it doesn't matter if they are organochlorines or organophosphate pesticides. Some of the pesticides have very similar symptoms, while some symptoms vary from one pesticide to the other. But some common symptoms related to respiratory distress, cardiac illnesses, nausea, dizziness, tremors, muscle problems are very common to many pesticides. So, for me, in one of my pesticide exposure incidences, I didn't know which kind of pesticide I got exposed to when I was living in US, because at the time I didn't look into too deeply as to which kind of pesticide was used when I bought it, and also when I had some building and society premises related pesticide control was being done by the societies in which I lived. But now, after almost 10-15 years of having had that experience in US, it's only in the last few years that I finally realized that the symptoms I had experienced back then was related to pesticide poisoning that had developed over time of exposure and the number of exposures. So I had got exposed to pesticides before the symptoms showed up in my body. The exposure to the pesticide happened at least 1 to 3 years before I got the severe illness symptoms. And the illness symptom that happened in the last time happened because the last usage was just a month of pesticide exposure inside my homes, when I used it to spray on the corners and walls of my home and cabinets in my home. But the other exposures that had happened 1-2 years previously. And with pesticides, what can happen to any of us, based on how I have experienced it and now I understand it a little bit more deeply, the poisoning that can occur and the trajectory of the poisoning that can occur. As a result, I'm making these videos. So what happened to me was, prior to the final symptom, when I used to live in society apartments where pest control was being done by the management on outside my home, my exposure wasn't too much, and all symptoms that I remember at that time that I had experienced, and I had just chalked out to just something normal happening in my life, and I didn't associate and correlate it with pesticide poisoning at that time. But I had experienced some skin irritation problems. I had experienced heavy sleepiness because the building management had also done some pest control inside the premises for inside the apartments itself, not just simply outside pest control. As a result, the pest control done inside the apartments led me to be more sleepier and drowsier. So, this was just the initial symptom because I was only getting exposed to very minor dose or normally recommended doses of pesticide usage by any government. But even though I had drowsiness, even though I had skin irritation, and even though I was a pharmacy student, I didn't correlate any of my symptoms back then to pesticide related exposure, because most of us, when we are generally leading a normal life, and because pesticide usage has been so prevalent in all our lives, where people do some pest control in their homes regularly, or even if they are not doing any pest control, their societies might be doing it, or shops where we are purchasing clothes and foods, and malls, everywhere pest control is done quite a lot in countries like India and even in countries like US. So, as a result, and I'm only talking about these two countries because I've lived in these two countries, and my pesticide poisoning exposures happened in both countries. It's just that the correlation and severity of my symptoms were higher in recent years because my degree of exposure was slightly higher in India, as well as my health was deteriorating a lot more, leading to a increased symptoms, and which led me to actually examining this a little bit more deeply. So when in US, which was almost 15 to 12 years back, when my pesticide exposures had happened, approximately, I'm not giving you the exact timeline possibly, but around that time, what else had happened was, I also had gone to a doctor for just a regular health checkup, and in that regular health checkup, because this area looked a little swollen, my doctor checked this area of my throat area, and she found some nodule, like she found that there might be some growth that could be possibly present in this area. As a result, she recommended that I go and do some testing, and after doing the testing for the thyroid area related thing that she suspected, it did turn out that near my thyroid gland I had small nodular growths. And at that time they also did an FNAC, and in that FNAC, I think the FNAC was done maybe like a year later, when I had done a follow up, and some of the nodules seem to have grown a little bit in size, and then she told, let's do a FNAC to see whether it's cancerous or not. So when the FNAC procedure was done, they use a fine needle to extract a little sample of the nodule, and they extract the samples from different areas. Like if you have 4-5 nodules, they will extract it from different nodules, or if it is a large nodule, they will take it from different parts of the same nodule. So whatever they did, I am a little vague on what happened when I did this procedure in US. All I remember is they extracted it using extracted the sample, and after taking the sample, the report came that it was a benign growth. So essentially it was a benign small pimple or tumor like growth, because it was the size of a pimple. And all I was recommended by the doctor, and they had also checked my thyroid levels to ensure that it is not impacting my thyroid gland function, and my thyroid symptoms were normal. But even though my thyroid symptoms were enzyme levels were normal, what was not normal is, if you have some thyroid related health issues, sometimes we have extreme sensitivity to heat or cold temperatures, and which was a consistent problem I had even long before these pesticide poisoning related things started showing up. So the reason why I'm mentioning this nodule is because we can develop cancers in our body when we have long term exposure to pesticides, and because pesticides have been in usage in majority of our earth's history for at least 70 to 90 years of our life, and most of us who are in middle ages must have had some kind of middle to the 70-year age range. Most of us could have had pesticide exposure continuously since childhood days, except that the dosages were so small that it didn't impact initially our health, or our bodies were so healthy that the impact on our health got ignored by us as some other disease state. Like when you are getting skin irritation, you will just think I'm developing some allergy. No one is looking deeper into the allergies because it's an occasional skin irritation. So say your municipality is spraying your area with pesticide once in 3-4 months. When they are spraying that area once in every 3 months, and occasionally after the spraying, if that spray had landed on your clothes or landed on your skin or landed on the ground, and while you are walking your feet absorbed some of the pesticide particles, or you inhaled it and then it got absorbed via the circulatory system and then ended up somewhere in your body, what happens then is we don't correlate that as a result of that instant exposure or a few hours later exposure via inhalation and circulatory system exposure. whichever exposure had happened, most of us don't get a skin irritation either immediately, or even if we get a skin irritation immediately, because we are not mindful or aware that pesticides can cause skin irritation, most of us just ignore it and think it's some other root cause. As a result, and if we are having just very minor skin irritations, we completely let go of the problem. If that minor irritation, then next stage goes to a little bit more irritation, where it has now escalated into giving us some rashes on our hands and feet and body, then maybe we will go to the pharmacy, go to a doctor, take a medicine for allergies. Or when we go to the doctor will prescribe us something for an allergy, and that's the end of it. But even though we are ignoring these initial pesticide exposure related symptoms, and we can ignore it when it is in the minor scale, because I also did the same thing when I was in US and I was just getting skin irritation, and at that time I didn't even realize that my drowsiness could be correlated to a pesticide exposure, because I just didn't put two and two together. I just assumed, because I used to work long hours as a pharmacist, I assumed that I'm tired as a pharmacist. Or also because some days when I didn't used to work, I used to work 1 to 2 hours daily in a gym. So I used to consider that if I'm getting drowsy or if I'm feeling tired, that tiredness and drowsiness is stemming from my either workout in the gym for 2 hours, or because I had a long day at work and I'm tired and fatigued. So, and this is which most of us will do. And it is not that the gym workout or extra loads of work some days at in the pharmacy could have been impacting my health. What happens with any kind of disease state or condition that finally manifests in our body is that it is not usually just one thing impacting our health. So when I was drowsy, it isn't that my long hours at work didn't impact me, or a hard day at work didn't impact me physically, or a hard day in the gym didn't impact me physically. These three factors were impacting me. But in addition to that, when I already had a hard day at work, hard workout in the gym, a long day at work, and I had, say, a week or two of this thing going on in my life, plus then on top of it I am getting exposed to some pesticides that have been sprayed according to government regulations, then also that added load on my body ends up making me feel more drowsy, more tired. And in the same house, if at that time I was living by myself, but say if I had three more other adults living in the same house, not each of us would have manifested that symptom of drowsiness in the same way. What could have happened while I was drowsy for, say, 3-4 hours because of 3-4 conditions impacting my fatigue, someone else who may not have had a long day at work, someone else who may not have had any long hours at work, someone else who's not working out in the gym for long hours, they might have got maybe 5 minutes of sleepiness or drowsiness and taken a short nap and forgotten about it. So the same pesticide can impact two humans in different ways. Another thing is, if someone has different body structure, even then a person with a taller body structure, fatter body structure, thinner body structure, shorter body structure, each family member with a different body structure, each family member of a different age group and a different gender will manifest the same pesticide exposure related poisoning symptom in a slightly different manner. That's why when there are 30-40 symptoms of pesticide poisoning, 5 to 10 symptoms of immediate poisoning due to exposure, or all these symptoms don't happen at the same time in the same patient, and even when 4 or 5 people were exposed to the same thing at the same time, or even when a colony of people of 1,000 people are getting exposed to a societal spraying of pesticide. It's not that 1,000 people who are living in the same society as my father in India, because this has also happened to me in India, when societal spraying was happening or municipality is spraying pesticides in these places, and there are, say, thousands of people getting exposed to it. Not each of those thousands of people exposed to it will manifest all the symptoms or even some of the symptoms. You might only have one or two symptoms, and most of us will have either skin irritation, allergy, little bit of stomach upset, runny nose, excess sweating. These will be the major symptoms after immediate exposure to a pesticide. But because all of us are chronically and continuously getting exposed to pesticides from various sources in our normal lives, now what starts happening in our body over time is, as the pesticide starts accumulating in my body, slowly over time, any of my body's systems that are primarily involved in eliminating the pesticide can stop working. And when it stops working or it gets blocked because too much pesticides are bound to the organs which are supposed to excrete it out, say the pesticide is accumulating in my lymph nodes, or it is accumulating in this area, and as a result, while it is my lymph nodes and circulatory system are trying to get this out of my body, and it needs to, how will it get it out? The lymph nodes might sweat it out, the might help us in sweating it out, the circulatory system might help in just moving the pesticide. Both lymph node and circulatory system will help in moving the pesticide down, further down to the liver and stomach, so that the liver and stomach can excrete it out using their different processes to eliminate poison from our body. That is the function. And lymph nodes or some of the immune system, defense systems action has anyways, I have to brush up my knowledge about the lymphatic system, so sorry about that. I will talk about the lymphatic system later on. But in our immune defense system, there are certain things called macrophages which can engulf also a toxin and try to break it down and then excrete it out of the body. But if the toxin is a large size chemical, then it is harder to break it down. Or if we don't have enough macrophages in our body, we don't have enough good blood circulation in our body, because our circulatory system's responses also can get impacted with long-term chronic pesticide exposure. So as a result, and which is what happened to me, and that's why I'm talking about it, even though circulatory system related problems are only superficially taught in pesticide poisoning, but circulatory system also and cardiovascular system gets impacted as well from pesticide poisoning over long chronic poisoning. So as a result, what started happening was the pesticides are backing up in my system. That's why some nodules developed. There were also pesticide exposure prior to this conscious knowledge of the pesticide exposure and remembrance of pesticide exposure that happened during the time these nodules were discovered. I also had pesticide exposure as a child in India, because in our Indian homes we used to use benign spray and mosquito repellents. So I had pesticide exposure at that time also. And if Indian farmers are using pesticides in farming, then those pesticides are also present in our food. But my exposure to pesticides from food was a little less, because my mother was a very clean cook. So she would very carefully always wash vegetables very carefully, and hence I'm suspecting that my level of exposure to pesticides was much less than my mother's level of exposure to pesticides, as she was the one primarily doing all the cooking and washing of vegetables, and hence her exposure is higher. So in a family that can also happen, say, and that's why my symptoms of pesticide exposure and higher symptoms of pesticide exposure started happening more when I started cooking more, I started washing vegetables more, I was doing more of just indoor activities. That's when my pesticide exposure levels were higher in India, especially when I have not been actively working so much. And then for a while I also got other diseases which were impacting my health, all of which ended up making me so sick that any kind of exercise that I used to do regularly also was not possible for me. So any kind of toxin that could have been ejected out of my body while I'm exercising and detoxing myself via exercise, those detoxing mechanisms also reduced when I got very sick. And this sickness that started slowly developing in my body happened not just in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year exposure of pesticides, but many years and decades of exposure to multiple sources and multiple kinds of pesticides in daily lives. So when in US, the first symptoms were just very minor symptoms, and that's why they were ignored, because they were not impacting the quality of life and quality of health. But after the first few times when the building and society were doing some pest control, when I moved to a new place, in that new place I had also done some pest control, because my neighbors had a bed bug problem, and though they couldn't find any bed bugs in my own apartment, I still got paranoid and I sprayed bed bug related repellents in my apartment. Now sometimes when you spray it, there is a dilution that you should do. If you are not doing the dilution also accurately, that also enhances and can cause increased exposure to a dose that is harmful to us. And so part of my exposure at that time happened from there. Then I used to walk in the gardens of the society where I used to live, and the gardener, if they are doing any pest control and I am walking wearing a partly open toed shoe, then some pesticide exposure happened while I was walking as well. Because a couple of times when I walked on the gardens, my muscles of the foot, this area of the foot that is there where the arch of the foot is there, suddenly froze, and this muscle freezing and muscle spasming and all these problems can happen to those who are nutritionally deficient. But there is a nutritional deficiency component which happened to me. I had magnesium deficiency at that time, because I had gone to the doctor, and while doing a normal checkup it came out that I had magnesium deficiency. And second thing was, the muscle cramping also happens, not just when you have nutritional deficiency of some minerals, but in addition to that, if you have pesticide exposure, it can end up doing these muscular problems. Same way, at the time when I did the indoor pest control, what happened, it didn't happen immediately after I did the pest control, but a few months after that pesticide was sprayed inside the apartment, I realized that I was having a hard time climbing up the stairs, and my heart rate was going very high, and I was having some breathing distress. And I used to, at that point of time, go to the gym regularly for 1-2 hours. So even though I was working out for, and at that time, no, I was not doing 1-2 hours. I had reduced the 1-2 hour of gym workouts to only 1 hour or 40-minute workouts, because at that time I was taking some classes and I was very busy. So as a result, my workout time had reduced to half. But even though I was working out in the gym, there also I realized my distress was a little bit higher doing the workouts that I had been doing normally earlier than this. So as a result, I went to the doctor. And when I went to the doctor, I primarily went with thinking it is a cardiac problem. But when she was examining it, her test didn't show a cardiac problem according to her insight. And at that time, I was not mindful or watching what my heart rate reading was showing. So I don't know whether she misinterpreted the data or whether she was accurate about the heart thing, because I was extremely feeling my heart was overloaded and I was having a respiratory problem. So but the respiratory problem was mostly manifesting for me as a cardiac symptom. So but when she did a respiratory functional test to see whether my respiratory organ was functioning normally, it turned out that I was having very low lung function. So as a result, being a doctor and I also being a pharmacist, she gave me the right therapy based on the symptoms that were detected by the machine and the symptoms I had narrated. So she gave me a steroidal inhaler, and told me to take the inhaler for my symptoms. And it did help me with the breathing problems, and I took the medication for a while. But I am also very cautious. Being a pharmacist, I know the side effects of these medications. So being a cautious person, I didn't continue using the inhaler long term, because when my lung distress or breathing distress went away after using the inhaler, I stopped using it. and also it happened during that time. This was a 1 year before I left US. So that housing where I had this pesticide exposure, because some pesticides were sprayed in that housing, as a result, when I left that housing and came back to India after a year of this exposure and a few months, like I had used the medication given by the doctor for 3-4 months, but after that, when my symptoms had gone away, when I have also moved from the housing where I was getting the major symptoms from, I didn't have any symptoms in India, because the pesticides used in India are different. My body was not there in the same environment as those pesticides. So my body had healed, my symptoms had healed. And my body had also likely got a chance to eliminate the toxic pesticide away from my system. But if most of us who get a breathing distress or some other problem as a result of pesticide poisoning and don't know it's a pesticide poisoning, many a times what happens is a doctor gives you a breathing medication to help ease your breathing, because when this pesticide is bound to my lungs or respiratory tract, it is essentially clamping up the muscles there and preventing me from breathing clearly, because the poison is there in my body, right? So because I have inhaled a poison from the spraying that was done on the walls, and while the walls might have been sprayed with the pesticide couple of weeks back, but it stays in the walls until I wash the wall, clean the wall, vacuum the carpets. It will stay in any area where the spray through the pesticide on the home, right? So anywhere the pesticide was there, if I have sprayed it in my cupboard where my clothes are there, it was still there in my clothes as well. So it could have been, most of my clothes I used to at that time put in boxes or in Ziploc bags, but any clothes that were not in Ziploc bags or boxes, they also had minor exposure from the spraying, or even I hadn't even sprayed in the tables. I had in the cupboard shelves, I had actually swiped a little in the shelves, but from that also some exposure can happen when I'm swiping a little on the shelves. So whatever minor exposures also happened while I did this, or major exposures happened over the time I lived in that apartment, what happened eventually to me was that it caused these pesticides I was inhaling regularly or absorbing regularly via the clothes or while walking on the carpet or something. As a result, whatever had accumulated in my body initially impacted my lungs, because majority of it was inhaled, and because it was impacting my lungs initially, when taking the inhaler, because it is a poison to our body wants to eject that chemical out, or doesn't want more inhalation of the product. As a result, our respiratory organs are clamping up. It doesn't want to breathe it in. But the thing is, even though it's clamping and it doesn't want to breathe it in, when I'm taking the medication, what is happening? The medication's job is to open up my clamped up respiratory tract. So while the medication is giving me a symptomatic relief of opening up my respiratory tract, if my body continues to inhale that pesticide or any other additional pesticide that might be sprayed by governments and municipalities, they are building up slowly in my body if my body has not eliminated it out of my body. So that's why if you during COVID also, you will see when people were having respiratory illness, there were physiotherapists who were recommending online to do some physiotherapy breathing exercises, or some Indian people started doing yoga, pranayam related breathing exercise to expel out any toxin that our lungs might be breathing. So what happens when you're doing physiotherapy related exercises of the respiratory tract or yoga based exercises of the respiratory tract? If a chemical is being inhaled, or a virus is being inhaled, or any other additional toxins were being inhaled, all of them combined impact our respiratory health. So if you're doing a respiratory tract clearing exercise, it helps in expelling out any chemical, physical, biological toxin that we have inhaled. That's why those physiotherapy exercises were beneficial to anyone who can do it, even if you don't have COVID. Same way, if I'm doing exercise regularly, then anything that has been inhaled, absorbed, now gone to my heart, and from my heart and cardiovascular system eventually gone to my livers, there my liver is going to try to eliminate the toxin. But if my liver is overloaded via 2-3 different chemicals, or one chemical, one virus, and other things impacting my liver's health, then also things get backed up. And which is what happened. I had posted one video where I had told that this area, when and it is a basically my area under the eyes had darkened a lot, and I had puffiness, and this puffiness and darkening happens under the eyes when we have either liver health issue or kidney health issue, or even lymphatic system health issues, because these three systems are primarily involved in eliminating any chemical, biological toxins from our body. And when all these three systems, and cardiovascular system is also involved in it, but any of these systems, when they are overloaded with some chemical, biological, or other toxins, and too much exposure to too many different things or combined different things, that's when our body stops functioning normally, and some organ damage can start happening, or some organ malfunction starts happening. And that is when slowly cancer can also start developing in the body, because if organ damage has started happening, organ malfunction has started happening, if our cardiovascular system and all the body's immune defense systems and different organs involved in the immune defense system are not functioning accurately, then what is happening is our blood is not getting cleared, our sweat is not getting cleaning out all the toxins from our body. So all these different systems are backing up, they're not able to work. There's a backlog happening in our body. As a result, there's a operational, I'm also an operations oriented person, so I'm going to talk operationally about it. There's an operational backlog happening ki if my liver is overloaded and there are 10 toxins it has to eliminate from my body, and out of those 10 toxins, some of those toxins can even bind to liver cells. So now what is happening is there are two ways in which liver is getting operationally challenged. It is not able to chemically break down and do its normal work because it's overloaded. Instead of, when in normal times it can process out say 5 to 6 toxins easily, the additional 4 toxins that are there in the body are backing it up. And I'm just giving a random number, it doesn't mean this is how the liver works, but it's for understanding how it works. Like any of us, if we are, when COVID happened, many people got very challenged at work, like what job that 10 people could do in the office, if out of those 10 people 5 people are either sick, or 3 are sick and 3 are taking care of their parents, the rest of the people who are left in the workplace are operationally backed up, because they can't do the work of 10 people. How much ever they try, they can manage the work of 10 people. 4 people can do 10 people's work for a week or 2, but if it is a month or 2 of distress, then you can't take up that extra workload. Same way with our liver is not able to take the extra backload, when normally it can take some level, it can even increase a little bit of its normal capacity to do a little bit more than normal. But if it is absolutely a lot more than normal, it isn't able to completely do all the functions that it should do. And the second problem with the liver though is, it's like if 4 people are left in the office and they have to do 10 people's work, but out of those 4 people also, suddenly say one of the person was taken away by the boss for a tour or something, then again they are backed up, because one person is now bound up in some other activity. So which is what happens to our liver. Like if some of these chemicals which are can have the capacity to attach to our organs or muscles and other aspects of our organ function, if it binds up that organ's normal functionality, then the normal liver also that could function and clear out 10 toxins. Now that liver is not able to clear out all the 10 toxins, because part of the liver is bound up by these chemicals and not able to function. And when the liver is more and more not able to function, or if the complete liver gets destroyed as a result of these chemical exposures, eventually you will end up having liver damage. So that's how liver damage develops, organ damage develops. And when liver, organ, or any other organ system function damage is continuing for a long time, that is when slowly cancer also starts developing, because normal functions of the body are completely disrupted. And that is what happened to me. For me, I got symptoms. I didn't actually know initially it was cancer symptoms. First of all, I had two types of cancers developing in my body. One that was developing these nodules that developed in US so many years back. When I moved back to India, I'd forgotten that these nodules were present in my body. I was busy just visiting family, and I was a little bit depressed also because I got divorced and everything. So I was not having a great time taking care of my health. Though I was trying actually at that time, even though some pressure was there, I was also trying. My focus was to cheer myself up. So in order to cheer myself up, I was traveling with friends, traveling with family, going to I would do exercises very regularly to keep up my body's those happy chemical levels high, so that I don't get too much into depression. Then I had also been taking some depression medications which I wanted to wean off of. So slowly I started weaning off using normal using meditation practices, yoga practices. So slowly I was managing my health of the mental health part. I was not focusing so much on the physical health part, because I thought I had lived in India, I had grown up in India, I should be okay living in India. But even though I wasn't focusing on my physical health, and I ignored one of the prescriptions of the doctor which said that I should go and do a ultrasound checkup. So for 5-6 years I didn't do any checkup. But only when I started getting symptoms which correlated with thyroid cytokine storm related symptoms, and I was having a lot of symptoms related to cytokine storm. As a result, I finally went to a thyroid doctor, and but my symptoms had been going on for 5-6 months. At that time there was COVID also happening, so the doctor was more concerned about COVID than about any out of normal thyroid patient things. As a result, because she was more used to just checking thyroid hormone levels and that's it, she was not into understanding other disease states. So she didn't understand some of my symptoms. She didn't even let me narrate some of my symptoms. Then eventually though, because she was not listening to that I had a problem going on for 6-7 months, she was not ready to listen to that. So at that time I just showed her my prescription from US about the ultrasound. And that's when I went and did the ultrasound. Again, I had to do an FNSC because the ultrasound did show that these nodules had grown in size, and some of these were also hurting when they were doing the ultrasound. As a result, they did the FNAC again, and this FNAC, this time I realized how they were taking the samples, because I was more observant. And at that time I realized they took samples from 3 different nodules, and when I got the reports back later on, they had made multiple slides of these 3 different nodules. Now in one of the reports, the first report of the hospital where I did the FNSC showed I will post about this cancer related video in the next one, because this video is getting longer and it is a long story. But I had both thyroid related pre-cancer condition developing and another cancer condition developing from new pesticide exposure that had happened to me in India while I was living in India for the last 7-8 years. And as a result, when 2 types of cancers or pre-cancers were developing in my body, when you are having only one cancer and it's slowly developing, you can still manage to be functional. But if you have 2 types of diseases developing at the same time in your body, or impacting your health at the same time in your body, at that time you get very much debilitated. So I had completely broken down, and it was very confusing also for the doctors, because 2 different kinds of diseases were happening at the same time. And both these diseases, when they are stemming from pesticide poisoning or any other kind of poisoning related symptoms, can also look and mimic some other disease states. As a result, the doctors didn't detect my second cancer. I am the one who, after not getting the right resolution from the doctor, had to sit down and look at my reports, had to sit down and study a little bit more and reflect a little bit more about my life, to figure out that eventually it turned out that majority of those symptoms were coming from pesticides. And as a result, I'm making this video. And it was not pesticide poisoning related. The symptoms that I showed in my previous videos, the 20-30 symptoms that can majorly show up in anyone's bodies, most of those symptoms showed up in my body, but at different time points from different pesticide exposures and different days of exposure. So this is what happens when in modern lifestyle, if we are having multiple sources of pesticides impacting our health. But eventually, after different exposure from different sources in different time points and different days of my life, living in different cities also, eventually after 10 to 15 years of different kinds of exposures, a cancer can develop in anyone's body, and initially the cancer will look like some other disease state. That's why it is important that if you don't want the cancer to develop, you can easily, when you are having some other disease state cropping up in your body and you have correlated it to a pesticide exposure, it's safer if you stop using the pesticide, reduce using the pesticide, start keeping better, cleaner home environments than focusing on using a chemical to solve a pest control problem that can be solved just by manual means. If that makes sense, I hope it made sense. Drop a comment if you have any comments on this. I will talk about the second cancer related symptoms in the next video, about how it kind of developed and progressed, and how I also tried to reverse the progression, some via my own knowledge and some via the knowledge provided by the doctors I had visited. So please let me know if you have any questions on this video, and I hope it was informative. Thank you.